Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Men's Sexual Mastery Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about the mysterious non-ejaculatory orgasms. We often get men reaching out to us, asking us how they can reach these states, how they can train for this. And this is a very deep, nuanced topic, and we're going to dive into it here. As we often say, one of the key reframes we want to start with going into this conversation is that at Men's Sexual Mastery, we don't refer to it. I mean, we will refer to it and reference non-ejaculatory orgasms, but a better way of saying it, actually, we found is non-ejaculatory orgasmic states, because it's more of a state of being than a destination. So I want to turn it over to you, Hawks, and hear a little bit about how you would start talking about this with a brother who is interested in exploring his ability to connect with these states.
Well, first of all, I would ask him, why do you want to experience that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, why would you ask him his why?
I think our why for anything is incredibly important, and that process of being asked, why do you want this, tends to be illuminating, and it can reveal a lot. And so for me, if it was a man that I was working with, first of all, I would be receiving a lot of data and input based on how he answers that why, that will help me understand more about him and what path is going to be most effective to take him on. Ultimately, there's one of the things I've found is that a common answer for why someone wants to experience non-ejaculatory orgasms, a common answer is one that is a little more superficial. It might be because I want to feel that experience. I want to taste that pleasure. I want to know that that I've experienced this thing that I've heard people talk about, this elusive, attractive experience, and that's fine. That I'm sure that is that's a part of it. That might be a part of the why. And what I've found is that through some inquiry, there's often a deeper and more powerful why underneath that. And it might be something like, I want to experience what's possible. I feel like I've been lied to in some way about what sex is and what intimacy is. A lot of men that I've talked with have come to a place where they feel like the sexual programming that they've received is missing a whole lot of what's actually possible there. And they want to open themselves up to a new way of being, a new way of experiencing sexual energy and sexual connection with another person. And they essentially want to broaden and enrich in their experience of love, of pleasure, of connection, of life itself. And so that, to me, if we can get to that place where a man is like, you know what, actually, that's what I really want. And the non-ejaculatory orgasm feels like it's tied to that, and it feels exciting and enticing. So I want that too. But if I'm being honest, what I really want is a deeper, more expansive and enriching experience of sexual connection and sexual energy and pleasure in my body. And so if we get to that place where there's actually a desire to just experience a new way of being in
Mm-hmm.
with that sexual energy, then I feel like, okay, there's enough motivation here and there's enough energy behind this man to start to take those steps to eventually get to the place where non-ejaculatory orgasms can be consistent and reliable and that's wonderful. But actually, in my observation, to get there requires, for most men, a reprogramming of a lot of sexual patterns and ways of being and beliefs about what pleasure is and beliefs about what's even possible for a man in his body. And So to have that strongly anchored why is necessary a lot of the time to actually be
Mhm.
able to start to peel back the layers and open up to what's possible. And it will also create the curiosity and the openness to experience something new, not thinking that we know what it's going to be. Or,
Mhm.
I heard someone talk about their experience of a non-ejaculatory orgasm. So now I want that. And the mind might attach to like, oh, this is what it's going to feel like. I'll know it happens when I experience X, Y, and Z, because that's what I heard Ben and Hawks describe. And that's why we
Mhm.
tend not to go into too much of our own personal experience with this, because it's so different and unique for each of us. And if there's something that I know you and I have both observed, is that when there's a strong attachment to a specific outcome of, then we we tend to miss what's actually happening and what's actually possible for us. So
Mhm.
releasing the attachment to those outcomes and actually reorienting towards what I really want is a new way to
Mhm.
experience sex and pleasure and intimacy. And I just know that that new way is going to be so much more expansive and fulfilling and generative and nourishing for myself and my partners. And that's what I really want.
Yeah. Yeah. It's to me, it's approaching the mystery on its own terms,
Mhm.
instead of projecting what we think it's going to be or trying to control or manipulate it. There's a deeper intelligence, in these states of being beyond what the mind could ever grasp. And I remember one of the first times some of the dots really connected for me was at a Tantra retreat when they were talking about these states. And they told us it's like one and the same with transcendental meditative states. It's these bliss states that one of the requirements is just no craving, no aversion, no attachment, no control.
Yeah.
It just happens. It's like an accidental state
Yeah.
when your mind is no longer present. And so that's why we say all the time we're merging meditation and sex in a lot of
Hmm.
this work. So I know that this can be challenging for a lot of guys to wrap your head around, and we're going to do our best to like try to wrap our heads around this. But it's good going into this that we just name that this is a great mystery, and you have to
Yeah.
drop your mind and just let it happen on its own
Yeah.
terms.
It doesn't happen in the mind. It happens in the
Mhm.
body. And
Yeah.
this is such a common pattern for men. And like I absolutely have done this in my life and still do at times, but I've gotten more aware of it. Um, the this intellectualization and mentalizing of, okay, if I do XYZ, this will be the outcome, and I've got to do it perfectly, I've got to follow the steps, and I'll be so focused. I was in the past, like this came up in many different ways, one of them being in breath work. When I was doing a breathwork facilitator training, and I remember I would go so hard in our breathing sessions when I was a participant, because I was like, oh, I'm going to do this the best. I'm going to breathe so hard and so perfectly. And I was so focused on what I was doing that I missed what was actually happening in my body.
Mhm.
And other people would come out of that experience sharing their incredible psychedelic experiences and these massive, um, like beautiful, profound experiences that they had. And I would come out of the breathing thing being like, well, I was breathing really hard and I was doing it so
Mhm.
like with so much intention and focus, but actually I missed what was happening in my body the whole time. And
Yeah.
this is similar to, yeah, to sex. Is there, if we're really stuck in the head about, okay, whether it's performance pressure
Mhm.
that we're putting on ourselves, or this like, okay, I got to follow step by step by step so that I can get this non-ejaculatory orgasm, we're probably going to be stuck up in our head and actually
Mhm.
missing what's happening in the body. And yeah, this is so true. I love that you brought up the meditation example as well. And that's been my experience sitting vipassanas. I know you've sat vipassanas as well, Ben. Vipassana, if anyone isn't aware, it's a 10-day silent meditation. And those states of orgasmic bliss, what I now understand as orgasmic bliss, of feeling the aliveness of every single cell in my body vibrating with this incredible frequency of love, of
Mm-hmm.
oneness, of pleasure, of bliss. That's happening all the time. And it would take me until day 7 or 8 of the silent meditation to actually quiet my mind enough to feel and be to free myself, to liberate myself of the craving of that experience, or the aversion of the discomfort I was feeling in my body from sitting upright for 10 hours every day. And I would get these little glimmers of, holy cow, this is the most
Yeah.
incredible feeling I've ever had. And then I would pretty quickly latch onto the craving of it and be like, oh yeah, more of this. This feels amazing. And then poof, poof, it would disappear.
It's gone.
Oh
Yeah.
man, oh, I did it. I did it. I went into my head. I went into the craving of it.
And that exact same mechanism is what applies here. So I'm so happy we're naming it. Like any man who's tuning in, if you have a meditation practice, it's this exact same thing. It's the same thing going on for sure. And we know what we teach all the time, and this comes from Taoism and traditional Chinese medicine, that the nature of sexual energy is that it binds and amplifies. We talk about this all the time. It's turning up the volume. It's like gasoline. So if you can imagine, if you're someone who has touched some of those states in meditation or with psychedelics, or some of these altered non-ordinary states, if you bring in sexual energy, it's just like 10x or 100x. So it's like all the more reason to bring together, the primal sexual energy, what's often cast away in spiritual traditions, even like a lot of meditative traditions, and join them together in a sacred way is really what's at the core of all of this. And I do want to offer, just start moving into a little bit of a process and framework for guys, though, because we do have notes on this, and we're excited to go into it with you guys. Just to start out, I want to mention that all of the process of this, as Hawks mentioned, is the deepest inner journey you'll ever go on. It's going to bring up all your blocks, all your programming, all the ways you're stuck in your head. There's nothing that doesn't get surfaced by this sexual energy. So again, this is why we have the training. What we're going into today is kind of at the heart of the whole training. But I just want to preface that and give that disclaimer that, you can follow these steps. And if you're needing support, like, reach out to us. That's what we're here for, because a lot of stuff can come up. So that being said, yeah, I'd love to pass it actually to you, Hawks, and hear, what's the frame on the actual sequence and our frame we bring in men's sexual mastery. What is a non-ejaculatory orgasmic state? How do we reach it, and what are the steps while releasing outcome, like we've talked about?
Yeah, I would I would bring in two overlying aspects of it. One of them being, and this is something this is a way that we've heard it described that lands well. These aren't our original words, but it feels very true, and that's that non-ejaculatory orgasms are the byproduct of the accumulation of energy. So there's that piece of it. Accumulating energy, cultivating more energy, building up our sexual energy to the place where then it bubbles over and spills over into these non-ejaculatory orgasmic states. That's one part of it. And then the other part of it, in my experience and observation, is our ability to relax, to soften into that, what can be overwhelming amounts of energy, to be able to hold, to be in the containment of that immense amount of energy, and hold the polarity of being able to soften and relax into it. So that's where I would start. And yeah, we could talk about our 6-stage framework that will take any man who goes through it, and will take him through a process and a journey to get to that place. And ultimately, when it comes to experiencing the non-ejaculatory orgasmic states, I think the simplest way to describe it is it's the accumulation of energy blended with our ability to soften and relax into that, while still holding the containment of it. the paradox. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great frame. And as you mentioned, the bubbling over with that accumulation of energy. Let's just lay down the metaphor of the cup. If each of us has a cup or a bowl, a vessel, this containment of life force energy of chi. As we're learning to hold on to our sexual energy and move our jing is technically the sexual energy. We're learning to transmute that into chi and eventually into shen. That whole process is what's filling our cup up, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But yeah, let's get into the 6 stages of how do we fill up our cups, and as well, how do we soften ourselves and get into this relaxed state with these massive amounts of energy moving through us.
Mm-hmm.
What's the first step, Hawks?
So the first step is contain. Like you were saying, Ben, understanding that we have the capacity to solidify our own container that is our vessel. It's our physical body, and it's a lot more than that. It's also our mental, emotional bodies that all contribute to either the strength and capacity to hold and contain more energy, or there's gaps and there's holes in our vessel, physically or mentally or emotionally, where we're draining and we're leaking that energy. So the first step is solidifying our container. And we can think about that as our masculine pole of containment. How strong and steadfast and sturdy can we be in all aspects of our life? And especially and particularly in regards to our sexual energy. The next stage is direct. So as we're building and accumulating more sexual energy, that will tend to focus in our genitals, in our root. In order to actually fill our whole cup, we got to be able to direct that energy up into other parts of our body, into other parts of our being. And this is where you were speaking to the transmutation of Jing into Qi. Jing we can think about as a more solid, like ice form of energy. Qi, the ice is melting and it's becoming water. And now we can move that through our whole system. So now we're able to expand our capacity to contain and hold so much more, because we're not just using the tiny little bottom part of our cup, we're using the whole thing. So contain, direct, and then stage 3 in our system is regulate. And regulate, this is when we start to really bring in that softening, the capacity to actually ground ourselves as we're being in the experience of holding more energy. It's very activating. It's activating for our nervous system. It's activating for our old wounds, our traumas, patterns, all of these aspects of our being that you were saying, Ben, start to get illuminated. Nothing can hide in the growing energy that we're building in our system. And so our capacity to regulate ourselves, to ground and be the lighthouse in the storm, to be the mountain, this is what allows us to then start to bring in the feminine pole of softening. And this is another way that I would describe the process of reaching non-ejaculatory orgasms is balancing our masculine and feminine, our inner masculine and feminine. Because yes, having that containment and having the direction and the discipline is incredibly important. But if we're not able to soften into all of that, if we're not able to relax enough to actually let that energy move, because that's how energy starts to move in our body, in our system. That's how emotions start to actually be felt, is we got to soften enough. That's why being held by someone or going into a breathwork journey or spending time out in nature can help us tap into some of those some of that emotional energy that's just below the surface. That's another Emotions are just another experience of energy. And in order to feel them, first we got to soften a little. And so in order to feel and move sexual energy, we need to be able to soften ourselves physically, softening the tissues in our body, and mentally and emotionally softening ourselves as well. And that's not to say we're weakening ourselves. It's actually the opposite in my experience, because when we hold both of those poles, where I have the containment and I'm able to soften into it, that's when the fireworks really start happening. Those two poles feed off each other and they amplify each other. And so that's,
Real quick on that, Hawks. I just had this little ping as you were sharing this, that this is one and the same with our female partners as well. Like, you're not going to hold her in the throes of ecstasy and orgasm and pleasure without also having the capacity to be with her in her hardest moments, and in her, let's say, like her in her cycle. Let's look at her cycle, even like her luteal phase, or when she's menstruating. Like, that's that you have to be able to hold a woman in the full scope of her emotionality to actually tap into the good stuff. And the same thing goes for the feminine within us, and that we're also learning to hold the difficult emotions. It's the same neural circuitry as a non-ejaculatory orgasm, the emotions that you have. And I think this is an important link for a lot of people. It's like we often want to try to just pigeonhole different things, and like, oh, this is my sexual energy and my sexual experience, and this is my emotional experience or my psychological or energetic experience. All of it is connected in this space. And the ability to embrace all of it and not force or control, going back to the beginning of this conversation, is what allows the blooming of it. And we also know in the Taoist lineage and these teachings that they say that love amplifies sex and
mhm,
sex amplifies love,
mhm,
and they're synchronistic. And so the more that we bring unconditional love, for instance, to our partner, allowing her to express, have her full range of emotions and love her no matter what's coming up, the more she opens, the more pleasure we're going to experience. The same applies to ourselves. And that is ultimately what's at the core of this work, is like, what's standing in the way of my own self-love and acceptance of myself, of my reality, of everything around me. And this is what helps us drop the mind, like we talked about, to get into the body. It's making peace with what is.
yeah,
So yeah, I just want to add that in as well. For, I know that regulation, there's so much to this step as well, but
mhm,
it's adjusting to that. We talked about contain in the beginning, holding that energy, patching up the leaks, not ejaculating all the time, getting off porn, noticing what's draining your energy and your mind and your emotions day to day, building it up in the second stage, and beginning to direct that energy with these sexual transmutation tools, which that in itself is like a massive, we can't get too deep into that today, but like we've shared some of those. But then this regulation is just adjusting to this increased level of amplification within us that's bringing up all the shadows, all the beliefs, all the stuff to be processed within us, so that we can ultimately learn to make peace with it, which I think is this softening you're
mhm,
talking about, which will be expressed in the body when it's softened in the mind, in that connection. So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you touched on something there that I would love to come back to later on, the connection between love and sex and love, and how
Mhm.
they're synergistic and amplify each other. And I would suggest that there is a degree of love and open-heartedness that is required in order to experience non-ejaculatory orgasms. And so maybe
100%.
we'll in that, and we can come back to it at the end. But for now, I want to, yeah, let's move on to stage 4, which is
Mhm.
strength. And as you were speaking to the energetic, the mental, the emotional bodies and experiences all being interwoven, so too is our physical body interwoven into all of this. So stage 4,
Yeah.
strengthening, is where we're now looking at, okay, where can we start to solidify our physical body with our diet, nutrition, health, lifestyle, strength training, qigong, all of these different ways that we start to build our capacity in our physical body to also hold more energy and to more skillfully move that energy and to ground that energy. And there's so much in that stage and module as well that is, for some men, going to be one of the lowest hanging fruit. If your physical health is really awry, if there's toxicity in your body, if your hormones are completely out of whack, if your sleep is completely, you know, if your sleep is awful, there's some really low-hanging fruit there and necessary steps to take, because our sexual experience, the aliveness of our sexual energy and our libido is directly related to our overall vitality. And so that's an important stage to have in there, and we could have put it anywhere on the journey, but we put it right in the middle because we like to give enough for men to start to feel this energy and build it and work with it. And then it's like, okay, and now let's make sure that we're also addressing the physical health. And then from stage 4, we move on to stage 5, which is attunement. And stage 5 and stage 6, attunement and amplification, are focused more on how we bring this energy that we've now been cultivating, directing, regulating within ourselves. How do we then bring that now into partnership, into relationship, into the sharing, the merging, the mutual amplification of sexual energy that comes from being in intimate connection with another person? And the attunement is that's a necessary part of actually being in connection, not just mutual masturbation, friction oriented sex that's goal oriented and actually disconnected from what's possible in those two bodies and two beings really coming together and merging. And bringing in the attunement allows us to create the free flow of energy between those two sexual partners. And that is what creates the amplification of energy. When, if we're speaking in heterosexual terms, if a man and a woman come together, when there's an openness, the attunement, and a level of open-heartedness, and ideally free flow of love between those two partners, and free flow of energy and power, the generous giving that a man can bring, giving his energy, giving his sexual energy, giving his presence, giving his heart to his partner, opens her up to then give her yin, her watery, balancing, nourishing energy, her heart, her fluids, to him. And then in turn, that bolsters his yang, that bolsters his energy. And it's this positive feedback loop where the more that we open ourselves with presence and care and attunement and love to our partner, the more she will then open and give herself to us. And it just creates this cascading back and forth that builds both people up, and the energy builds to the place where now, okay, we're at that level of overflowing. There's such an abundance of energy, and there's the containment and the softening into that energy that now it's the natural byproduct is eventually these non-ejaculatory orgasmic states. And that's how I would, as succinctly as I can, describe our stage process.
Our 6 stages. Yeah. And it's worth mentioning here that at this point in discussing this, that generally speaking, what we found is that most of the non-ejaculatory states, or the likelihood of reaching a non-ejaculatory state, is much higher in partnership than it is on your own. It's just much more in flow. It's much easier to get out of our heads, like we said, and get into these bliss states. So, that being said, backing up a little bit, like what we say in all of this work is that this is internal martial arts training. If non-ejaculatory orgasms are the byproduct of the accumulation of energy, stages 1 through 4 that we talked about are doing the inner work, learning how to move this energy up, learning how to regulate ourselves, how to soften, building our physical bodies, patching up our energetic leaks, all of these pieces, and we have mechanisms and protocol within the training program that are involved in self-pleasure, stacked with a bunch of different tools from Tantra and Taoism and all these different lineages that we found are the most potent tools to move that energy and to have that experience firsthand. But ultimately, all of that is training for game day, which is relationship. And this gets into the piece that, we are going to come back to, Hawks, with love amplifying sex, sex amplifying love, which I think also brings us full circle back to the why. when a man is entering this space. And you spoke to it briefly, but I'd love to turn it back to you to speak about that alignment with the heart and love, and like true love for someone, and true, making love from a space of heart cock coherence, as we like to say.
Mm.
The cock in tantra is taught to be the heart wand. It's like the furthest most tip, and in Chinese medicine, the tip of the penis is the heart point. So thinking and reframing our sexual energy as this sacred, godlike energy that is merging masculine and feminine in this alchemical union.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'd love to hear you speak a little bit to that, and how that plays into these states.
Mhm. Yeah. So when I brought that up, I was having this little thought experiment in my mind as I was hearing you speak, which was, is it possible? Could I imagine it being possible for myself to tap into non-ejaculatory orgasmic states in a one night stand? And the first thing that came up is like, well, it's pretty vulnerable. What it takes, at least for me, to get to that place of truly opening up to non-ejaculatory orgasmic states of bliss and openness and oneness, it's a vulnerable place to be in, because it requires so much of that softening that I was speaking to. It also requires the strength and the solidity and containment, and that part's great. And probably most men would feel comfortable bringing that aspect into, say, a one night stand. But to actually soften and open and to relax enough into that connection with another person, and that experience of pleasure and sexual energy moving through, that can be a vulnerable place. And for me, I would need to feel a level of trust and comfortability with the person I'm having sex with, to be able to then allow myself to really open up and to go into that fully. And it's not to say that it couldn't happen on a one night stand or in casual sex. I believe it can, actually. I know that it can, but it still requires there to be that level of trust and openness with that person, and some, in what I would describe as some openness to love. And it doesn't need to mean that you're in love with this person in the way that you would be in love with your wife or your long-term partner, the woman of your dreams, all of that. Like, the love comes in so many different shapes and sizes. But to have an openness in your heart, and to feel the openness in their heart, to be like, yeah, I see you, I respect you, and I'm willing to be seen by you, and I trust that I can go into my full experience and expression here, and that will be held in a good way. And that goes both ways, for sure. For the woman as well, it's probably even more important. But yeah, so what I would say around that is that to really open up to those non-ejaculatory orgasmic states requires a level of trust and comfortability, and the free flow of love part. The last thing I'll mention here, and then I'd love to turn it back to you, Ben, is what I was speaking to previously about sharing our energy, giving. And so that element of really opening one's self up, if you're a man, opening up to the possibility that, as you were saying, Ben, your cock is actually an extension of your heart, and there is energy flowing, doesn't mean that, like, there is energy flowing out of your cock into the person that you're in penetrative sex with, and not physical fluids like you're having an ejaculation, but energetic. There's energy moving, if you allow it to then be penetrating so much deeper into that person you're in sexual connection with. And in order to have this free flow of energy between the two people, which we could call like the microcosmic orbit circulating between two bodies, which is incredibly valuable in accumulating more energy, as I was speaking to before, and also just nourishing and balancing both partners. But
Mhm.
ultimately, in order for me as a man to really open up and give that energy from my cock,
Mm-hmm.
I need to have a level of respect and trust and love and admiration for the
Mm-hmm.
person I'm in connection with to really truly freely give myself in that way. And in
Mm-hmm.
doing that, if that's available and I can tap into that, then it shifts the sexual experience, and she will feel it. Even though there isn't something physically happening, it's felt when we really open up that channel of our heart wand, now giving and penetrating into the person we're in connection with, the energy of love and our yang, our masculine essence, it spills into her, and that's so nourishing for her
Mm-hmm.
because it balances her, because she's a more yin dominant um, energy, and so that's balancing and nourishing for her, and then that will, as I was speaking to before, tend to lead to her response of now just naturally giving her yin to you more as well, and that's incredibly nourishing. That is like so nourishing. This is one of the things that, whether we're aware of it or not, it's one of the reasons why we feel so good after sex, is because
Mm-hmm.
we've been nourished by the opposite pole
Mm-hmm.
in a way that we need for our
Mm-hmm.
highest health and expression and power and vitality. And whether we're conscious of it or not, it's happening. But the more conscious of it we become, the more it
Mm-hmm.
happens and the more it can flow. And so that's what
Yeah.
I would say around that.
Yeah, and that last piece you just said, the more conscious we are of it, the more it grows. And that goes back to like Qigong principles and these ideas, not even just in Qigong, of it's the nature of reality that energy flows where the mind goes. And as we sharpen our ability to stay present, which is part of building our capacity with the sensations in the body, knowing how to get out of our heads and into our bodies, which is what all of this training is for, it amplifies the experience and it deepens those neural pathways. And when there's that feedback loop happening with a partner, it's just becomes this flywheel effect. And that's ultimately what can build to that
Mhm.
spilling over. So, yeah, I'm so happy we were able to cover all of this in the amount of time we had here. I know our time is coming up short, but I wanted to just touch a few more points really quick. Just I feel like a lot of the 6 stages we talk about, there's a lot within that, more than we could talk about today. But a lot of that is associated with the accumulation of energy, which is the first kind of arm here. And the regulation piece, I know, and the softening you mentioned is already baked into that. But I wanted to take a little extra time to speak specifically about relaxation from another frame, which is we say all the time that sexual mastery is nervous system mastery. So, just to lay this out, we've talked about it before on the podcast, but we have these unconscious programs running inside of us with our nervous systems and our body and our experience of sexual energy, where most of us, the default is that when sexual intensity increases, our bodies contract, our nervous system goes into sympathetic state, our breath gets short and shallow. So just specifically going a little bit deeper into the regulation piece and the softening, one of the key instructions here is that as the intensity increases, you're staying in your breath, you're staying in a parasympathetic state, you're dropping the energy down. And again, this is combined with a lot of other tools. If you decide, for guys who are in the program or want to join it, we bring in a lot more other stacks of tons of other tools. But at its core, if you don't have any other tools, just your breath is enough. Staying in the breath, sighing on the exhales, and allowing yourself to relax as that energy builds is what is shifting that nervous system response and retraining yourself.
Mhm.
And I just want to speak to that as the main core principle in the process of relaxation. And Hawks, I know you could share more around, really emphasizing this key of relaxation. And I know in a lot of the experiences you've had, within your blueprint specifically, there's been kind of that dynamic that goes on, and I've experienced it too as well. But I'd love to hear, what your thoughts are on the intensity coming up and the ability to relax and how that correlates to non-ejaculatory orgasmic states.
Mhm. Yeah. Where I'll go with this for sake of time is to give a really quick rundown of what tends to work best for me in this situation. So absolutely everything you spoke to there, Ben, the breath is crucial. It's in everything we do all of the time, and it's our most readily accessible tool to shift our state in any moment.
And
And
full disclaimer, as we said earlier, this is Hawk sharing his personal experience that is not universal. So take it in that context as well. But it can be really helpful. And I know I relate to it as well. So,
Mhm. Yeah, so what tends to work best for me is moving through the building up of arousal and pleasure and energy. If we think about like a chart, and we've shared podcasts on this before, how to prolong lovemaking. I believe that was the title of a podcast where we went into this chart, which you can think about
steps.
like a staircase. We're building up energy, we're building up arousal, and then we're allowing it to settle. We're not going over, we're not continuing past 80 or 85% of our arousal as a man so that we don't spill over into ejaculation, and we then allow ourselves to come into stillness and allow that energy to settle and integrate before we then take another step up the staircase and build more energy again. So moving up the staircase and then bringing in a breathwork practice, which the big draw is one that was taught by, carried, passed down by Montauk Chia from the Taoist lineages, which is essentially it's a breathing practice as we're in a more heightened state of arousal. And it's breathing that energy, that sexual energy, up from our root, from our genitals, breathing it up into the higher energy centers, the middle and upper dantian, with the physical contraction of our pelvic floor. And when I'm, as I was saying, the most reliable way for me to reach these states is to build that energy up, to go into a breathwork practice like the big draw that brings that energy up, and then I'll hold the breath, and I'm near my edge. I've been edging with my partner, but I'm not spilling over. I'm careful. I have the containment to know where that edge and where that line is for me so that I don't spill over into ejaculation. But I'm coming up to that edge, and then I'm drawing that energy, that sexual energy, up from the root using muscular contractions and the breath and the intentionality, the focus of my attention. And all of that's bringing the energy up, and I hold the breath. And my partner will typically go into this breath hold with me. She'll go into the breathing with me. Just like sympathetically, she like feels and sees me doing it, and then she'll go into it as well. And then I'm holding the breath at the top for a while squeezing the pelvic floor, drawing all of that energy up. And once I feel complete with the breath hold and I feel that it's safe for me to release all of my muscular contractions, which are creating another level of containment so that I don't spill over into ejaculation. And so this can be like can be a real edgy practice, and you might mess it up and go over the edge several times before you really find that sweet spot. But ultimately it's the paradox of building up that energy and actually going a little more into the sympathetic clenching and holding that, but not getting stuck in that, and knowing when, okay, now it's time, now I can release everything, and I let the breath go, and I let go of all muscular contractions, and I let my body go completely soft and limp, everything, and I'll just drape myself over my partner if I'm on top. Wherever I am, it's just looking, scanning the body. Where could I release tension a little more? Where could I soften muscles 10 or 20 or 50% more? And in that process of then releasing and softening everything, that's when waves of pleasure and I can drop into this non-ejaculatory orgasmic state for long periods of time. And it's in the complete beingness. It's also this paradox of doing and being. It's the paradox of the masculine containment and the clenching and the tightening and some of that sympathetic nervous system that does get activated in the building of arousal for me. And then it's going completely into the other side, full relaxation, full parasympathetic softening, and fully being, letting go of any doing whatsoever and fully going into the being. And that's when these valley orgasms as I like to describe them, and as Montauk Chia also uses the valley orgasm phrasing, which feels appropriate to me because it's this dropping down into
Mhm.
this place of bliss and oneness and pleasure. And there's so much happening internally, energetically, while physically we're just fully being and letting go of any doing. So that's what I can share now as a little practice, something that a listener could try on and explore. You can try that in your own solo cultivation practice or with a partner. And also, as we've said multiple times, I caution against, if you're early on in this work, really driving and focusing purely on how do I reach that state, because that state's wonderful, it's great, but honestly it's not even close to the level of fulfillment and richness that comes from that hour of lovemaking before that, and
Mhm.
depth of connection that I get to share with my partner in every moment of the day, in every aspect of our life, because I've opened myself up to a new way of being, with love, with pleasure, with sex, with intimacy. And that's actually where the gold is. That those non-ejaculatory states of orgasmic bliss are wonderful, they're awesome, but trust me, it's like that's not the end goal. That's not the
Mhm.
It's a byproduct of
Yeah.
actually like getting to the place where the process itself becomes the experience that is what we're actually what's sought after and what's relished. It's every moment in between. And so that's where I'll end it for me.
Yeah.
What would you
It's
like
the
to
journey.
add
It's
in
the
there?
journey, not, yeah, 100%. It's the journey, not the destination. And yeah, I think this has been, we've covered, I think, quite a scope of this topic, especially given all the nuances of it. And the last thing I'll say, is just again echoing the point that these bliss states are, you could say, are one and the same with like deep meditative states, or in breath work or psychedelics. And it's, at its core, it's actually learning how to tune into the subtle. Like as we learn to contain and build our sexual energy, our sensitivity goes up. Our ability to access pleasure is heightened. And my senses, my experience of some of this stuff is, and just another example I want to give is like I've gone into non-ejaculatory orgasmic states, quote unquote bliss states, just doing qigong barefoot next to a tree,
Mhm.
like full on shaking, just like holy cow, I can feel like the earth yin energy. And I know that sounds far out, but like that's pointing the way towards, I think, what you just said. It's like it's the journey, not the destination. My belief is that actually we're all experiencing, like if you're alive and breathing and listening to this, regardless of how your mind perceives reality and whatever programs you have running, or clenching and tension in your body, or things you wish were different, you wouldn't be breathing right now if life force energy wasn't, if chi wasn't flowing through you. And you actually are experiencing non-ejaculatory orgasms all the time, each and every one of us. And like it's just, actually it's about learning to cultivate the ability to connect to that subtle state, which becomes more and more powerful the deeper you go into this work. The more you open those neural pathways, get out of your head and into your body. And there are these elements that we've spoken to of ways to strengthen that and build that capacity and discipline. But also, it's just letting go, actually, and allowing something, an intelligence and a state of pleasure and bliss that is deeply transformational, to just let it move in on it. It has its own intelligence,
Mhm.
and it's almost like there becomes a point in my experience where it's like, who's containing who? Like, am I containing the sexual energy? Is the sexual energy containing me? Like, if this is actual, actually the life force of creation itself moving through me. So
Mhm.
I know that that's like a whole kind of like a rabbit hole we could go down, but I just want to mention it for those who have ears to hear and know what I'm speaking to. This is deeply, deeply spiritual, this entire path, and there's no getting around it. So
Yeah.
yeah, and what a beautiful thing, that like actually there's nothing to seek, there's nowhere to go. And the more we can tune into that state of being, the more likely we are to have these mind-blowing experiences. So
Yeah. Oh,
I'll drop the mic right there.
all right. Beauty.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. And if you're interested in joining one of our group trainings, we have another training coming right up in just a few weeks. We saw some slots available. Check us out at mensexualmastery.com. Big shout out, as always, to all the men who are in our community. Thank you guys so much for making this podcast possible, this mission, spreading this through the airwaves, and giving us all a way forward with our sexual energy that's empowering and aligned in the deepest ways with who we came here to be. So
Yeah.
thank you for, go ahead.
Shout out to those men in our community for showing up for yourselves and your relationships and your lives in ways that have been so expansive and powerful and transformational. And shout out to everyone out there who's listening in, whether you're in our community or not. If you're tuned into this, I'm sure that you've taken steps in your own life to repattern and reprogram aspects of your being in ways that are more in alignment with your true, authentic, highest self, and with more in alignment with the energy of love and connection in the world. And so, yeah, shout out to all the listeners, everyone out there. You're all doing something. I'm sure of it. So keep going. Let's go. And yeah, always fun dropping in with you, Ben. If we had more time, I'd love to actually pull on that last thread. You definitely opened a rabbit hole there. Maybe we'll get to it in a future show. All right.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Be well. We'll see you soon.